When my own son, my quiet, gentle Logan, looked at me and said, "Either serve Chelsea or leave," the world didn't break. It simply went silent. My hands trembled, but my soul didn't. I picked up my old handbag, the same one I carried through every storm of motherhood, and walked out, not realizing that moment would change everything. My name is Elaine Carter. I was 62, a widow for nearly 8 years, and living in a small apartment on the quieter side of Reno, Nevada. My life had settled into a simple rhythm: early morning walks, organizing old photographs, tending to my 2 potted plants, and meeting my neighbor, Mrs. Dalka, for weekly grocery trips. I had worked 37 years as a hotel receptionist at the Silver Peak Inn. Even after retirement, I still woke up at 5 out of habit, brewed the same medium roast coffee, and listened to the same old talk radio station while the city outside slowly came alive. It wasn't an extraordinary life, but it was mine, and I had made peace with its gentleness after losing my husband, Frank. His absence had become a quiet echo, sometimes painful, sometimes comforting, always present. My children were the center of my world. Logan, my eldest, had always been the careful, thoughtful child, soft-spoken, bookish, the kind of boy who would fix the back porch railing before I even noticed it was loose. Brielle, my daughter, was all fire and sunshine, quick-witted, fiercely independent, always pushing herself beyond what life set in front of her. When Frank passed, these 2 became my anchor in a storm I didn't know how to survive. We held each other tightly, the 3 of us, for years. But age brings its own challenges. And one evening, as I was cooking a small dinner for myself, a sudden wave of dizziness washed over me. Before I knew it, my knees buckled, and I woke up on the floor, heart pounding, fear creeping in like a cold wind. The doctor called it temporary overexertion, but the way he looked at me told me something deeper. He thought I shouldn't live alone for a while. When Logan heard about the incident, he insisted I move into his home until I felt stronger. "You raised me, Mom," he said. "Let me take care of you now." His voice had felt warm, genuine. I didn't realize then how quickly warmth can turn into something cold. I packed lightly, 2 bags, some clothes, my photo album, and the small wooden jewelry box that held the last letter Frank had written me. As Logan helped me into his car, I felt grateful, relieved even, believing I was stepping into a safe space with family. I didn't see the signs. I didn't sense the tension. I didn't know that the home I was entering wasn't the one I had imagined. I believed, naively perhaps, that love alone would create room for me. But sometimes, love from one side doesn't matter if the other side has already closed its doors. Logan and Brielle were raised in a home where money was always tight, but affection was freely given. After Frank's passing, I worked double shifts, stretched every dollar, and still tried to give them a childhood that felt warm, even when the world around us wasn't. Logan grew into a dependable man, working in tech repairs, patient with his hands and gentle with his words. Brielle, younger by 3 years, became a traveling nurse, always in motion, always chasing purpose. They grew differently, but both carried pieces of me and Frank in their hearts, or so I believed. While Brielle called me every morning with updates from new cities she worked in, Logan had grown quieter over the years. Not distant, just quieter, more thoughtful, more cautious with the things he shared. When he married Chelsea, I tried my best to embrace her, though I sensed early on that she was more guarded. She was raised differently, privileged, polished, taught to see life as something to be managed, not embraced. I didn't take her coolness personally at first. Many women need time to warm up to their husband's family. I gave her space. On the day I moved into their house, I noticed little things: the neatly arranged furniture, the spotless counters, the faint scent of vanilla candles burning in the living room. Their home felt organized, almost too organized, like a space where softness had no place to land. Yet Logan smiled at me with a warmth that made me believe everything would be fine. "It's temporary, Mom," he reassured. "Just till you feel better." I nodded, trusting his words. The first few days were uneventful. Logan helped me unpack, carried my bags to the guest room, and even made me tea the first night. Chelsea, though polite, maintained a measured distance. She asked if I needed anything, but her eyes didn't match the tone of her voice. They stayed sharp, assessing, as if I was already inconveniencing her. I told myself it was my imagination. Brielle called daily, demanding updates and offering to fly home. But I told her everything was fine. I didn't want her to worry. I didn't want her to rearrange her life for me. I didn't want to be a burden. But beneath the surface of Logan's home, something subtle had already begun shifting. Not enough to see, but enough that I could feel it, like pressure building inside a quiet room. I didn't know yet that love, when shared with someone who doesn't value it, can slowly start to suffocate. The day I officially moved into Logan's home felt like stepping into a chapter I didn't know I was unprepared for. After the dizziness episode, the doctor had emphasized rest, supervised meals, and avoiding stress. Logan took this seriously. He drove me to his home himself, chattering lightly, telling me he had already cleared the guest room, bought new bedsheets, and placed a small lamp by the bedside because he remembered I never liked sleeping in the dark. His thoughtfulness made me emotional. I squeezed his hand and whispered, "Thank you, sweetheart." He smiled, but it was faint, distracted, and I didn't understand why. Chelsea greeted us at the doorway, but not with the warmth I had hoped for. She stood with her arms slightly crossed, her smile quick and practiced. "Hi, Elaine," she said. "We've made space for you." Something about the pause between her words felt heavy, as if the space they made came at a cost neither of them wanted to admit. Still, I thanked her graciously, determined not to create friction. The guest room was tidy, sunlight streaming in through half-open blinds, giving it a soft glow. I placed my photo frame of Frank on the bedside table, right next to the lamp Logan had picked. For a moment, standing in that stillness, I felt grateful. I thought perhaps I could truly heal here. But by the third day, small shifts began. Logan seemed tense, cracking his knuckles more often, rubbing his temples when he thought I wasn't looking. Chelsea grew oddly quiet around us at me, not out of shyness, but out of something else, something colder. She would wipe the kitchen counter immediately after I touched it. She sighed when I sat in the living room recliner, as if my presence was taking something from her, rather than adding warmth to her home. At dinner, she would turn conversations toward her discomfort in subtle ways. "I'm just not used to someone being around the house all day," she would say lightly, twirling her fork. "But I guess we'll adjust." Her eyes always flickered toward Logan then, as if reminding him of something they discussed behind closed doors. I tried to make things easier. I stayed mostly in my room, read books, folded my own laundry, and avoided interrupting their routines. I wanted to be small, invisible even, hoping it would ease whatever silent tension had begun forming. But invisibility has a painful side, because the more you try not to disturb someone, the more they act as if you never should have existed in their space to begin with. One evening, while I was sitting quietly by the window, I overheard them arguing in the hallway. Chelsea's voice was sharp. "Your mother is changing everything in this house, Logan. She's always around. I can't breathe like this. Logan's reply was hushed, careful, but I caught fragments. She's recovering. It's temporary. Please be understanding. My heart tightened. I wanted to cry, but I held the tears back. I never wanted to be a burden, not to my husband, not to my children, but life has a cruel way of making you feel heavy even when you're trying your hardest to be light. The first clear sign of Chelsea's discomfort came quietly, almost politely, wrapped in a smile that didn't reach her eyes. It was a Tuesday morning. I had woken early, made myself a small cup of chamomile tea, and settled in the living room armchair because the sunlight there eased the stiffness in my joints. Chelsea walked in, hair tied in a perfect bun, dressed for work. But instead of greeting me, she paused, staring at the chair as if it personally offended her. "That's where I usually sit in the mornings," she said carefully. I immediately stood up, apologizing. She waved her hand as if brushing away my apology, but the stiffness in her shoulders told me the damage was done. After she left for work, I moved back to the guest room, telling myself it was just an innocent moment. But moments like that began adding up. Chelsea started giving remarks just soft enough to be excused as innocent, yet sharp enough to cut through my confidence. When I washed a cup, she would re-wash it immediately. When I folded a blanket, she would unfold it and smooth it her way. When I hummed in the kitchen, she closed the door gently, as though my presence disrupted the harmony of her perfect household. One afternoon, I entered the kitchen to prepare a light lunch. Chelsea walked in seconds later, eyebrows raised. "Oh, you're cooking," she asked. "I usually keep this kitchen spotless. Grease splatters easily." I froze, feeling suddenly clumsy, old, inconvenient. "I'll clean everything," I said softly. She forced a smile. "Of course you will." Those words stayed with me long after she left the room. Logan noticed none of it, or pretended not to. He would walk in after work, kiss Chelsea's cheek, ask her how her day was, and she would sigh and say, "It was fine, just a bit overwhelming." She never mentioned me directly, but the implication hung heavy in the air. Logan's eyes would drift toward me, worry flickering in them before he forced a smile. "Mom, you okay?" he'd ask. I always answered the same, "Yes, sweetheart, I'm fine." I wasn't. The worst was a Sunday morning when I accidentally knocked over one of Chelsea's decorative candles. It didn't break, but it rolled off the shelf and onto the floor. Chelsea walked in just as I was picking it up. Her expression tightened. "This is why I prefer things in their place," she said coldly. "Some people don't understand boundaries. Some people. Not Elaine, not Mom, just some people. A stranger in her house, her words hit harder than the fall ever did." I apologized, but she turned and walked away, leaving me there holding the unbroken candle like a symbol of something much more fragile, my place in this home. By now, the air inside Logan's house felt thick, crowded with unspoken resentment that grew each day. I tried to shrink myself, to be quieter, cleaner, smaller. But no amount of shrinking can satisfy someone who resents your very presence. The shift in Logan began subtly, so subtle that if I didn't know my own son's heart, I might have missed it. It started with shorter conversations. He used to sit with me in the evenings, asking about my health, my hobbies, even gossiping lightly about people at work. But soon, those conversations grew brief. He would come home, give me a quick smile, then drift toward Chelsea as if drawn by an invisible thread. His shoulders always looked tense, like he was walking on a tightrope stretched between loyalty and pressure. Then came the distancing gestures. Simple things, but painful. One night, I made his favorite chicken soup, something I hadn't cooked in years. When he tasted it, I saw a flicker of nostalgia in his eyes. But just as quickly, Chelsea said, "We're cutting back on sodium, remember?" Logan's spoon paused mid-air. He put it down gently and said, "Maybe we can make something else next time, Mom." His voice was soft, but the words carved into me. Another evening, I joined them in the living room while they watched a show. I didn't sit close, just on the far end of the couch, knitting quietly. Logan shifted slightly, not away from me, but toward Chelsea, as if anticipating her reaction. She didn't say a word, but she shot him a look sharp enough to slice through the silence. Within minutes, he said, "Mom, are you tired? Want to rest?" It wasn't a suggestion. It was a plea disguised as concern. I nodded and left the room, swallowing my hurt. The worst moment, though, the one that told me I was losing my son long before I lost my place in their home, came late at night. I woke up thirsty and stepped into the hallway quietly so I wouldn't disturb anyone. As I passed their bedroom, I heard whispers, urgent, angry. Chelsea's voice. "I didn't sign up to live with your mother." Logan's. "It's temporary, Chels. She just needs time." Chelsea. "It's been weeks. She's always here. I can't relax. I can't be myself. This house doesn't feel like mine anymore." The hospital hallways were dimly lit as the evening settled in, turning the windows into dark mirrors. Viraj had been sitting outside the ICU for almost an hour, his legs shaking uncontrollably. The weight of his own guilt was pressing deep into his chest. The memory of the morning argument with his father, Raghunath, played in loops inside his head. He had stormed out of the house in anger, ignoring his father's chest pain. Now, those few seconds of anger felt like a lifetime of regret. Every beep from the ICU machine made him flinch. A little later, Madhavi and Neha rushed into the corridor. Their eyes were filled with fear as they approached Viraj. He didn't even raise his head. "How is he?" Madhavi asked in a trembling voice. Viraj couldn't answer. He simply stared at the floor. A moment later, the ICU door opened and the doctor came out, his expression serious. "His condition is unstable. The heart rhythm is fluctuating. We are trying our best, but the next few hours are critical." Madhavi felt her knees weaken. Neha supported her while Viraj let out a deep, trembling sigh. The doctor allowed them inside for a few minutes. Raghunath lay silently on the bed, eyes closed, face pale, chest rising slowly under the oxygen mask. Viraj stepped closer, held his father's cold hand, and whispered with a trembling voice, "Dad, I'm sorry. Please, please wake up." His throat tightened, and he had to bite his lip to stop himself from breaking down. Just then, Madhavi's phone rang. It was a call from the bank. The manager informed her that a large amount of money had been withdrawn from Raghunath's account using physical documents. Madhavi felt as if the floor slipped from under her feet. She immediately ended the call and told the children what happened. The news hit them like a punch to the stomach. Someone had stolen not just their money, but also their sense of safety. "Mom, did someone break into our home?" Neha asked, fear widening her eyes. Madhavi nodded slowly. Her mind spiraled back to the argument Viraj had earlier that week with a local vendor in the market, a man known for his rough company. Could this be connected? The corridor suddenly felt colder. Outside, footsteps echoed, lights flickered, and the pressure of the situation grew heavier. They weren't just fighting for Raghunath's life anymore. A new storm was approaching, one they weren't prepared for. The next morning arrived with pale sunlight filtering through the hospital windows, but none of them felt relief. Madhavi had spent the entire night awake, sitting beside the ICU door, thinking about the stolen money and the possibility of someone targeting their family. Anxiety carved deeper lines into her tired face. By noon, Viraj insisted they file a police complaint. Madhavi hesitated because leaving the hospital meant leaving Raghunath alone, but she finally agreed. Neha stayed behind. Madhavi and Viraj drove silently to the police station, the tension between them thick and unspoken. Inspector Mehra listened carefully as they explained everything: the bank withdrawal, the morning argument in the market, and the sudden illness of Raghunath. His expression sharpened when they described the suspicious neighbor, Jitpal, who had been hostile toward the family in the past. Mehra immediately began tracing the bank transaction and ordered CCTV footage from the branch. Within an hour, the footage arrived. The screen flickered before revealing a grainy but unmistakable figure, Jitpal. He was using forged documents, confidently signing papers, and withdrawing the money. Madhavi felt her chest tighten. She had never imagined someone living a few steps away could attack her family like this. "Don't worry," Inspector Mehra said. "We will arrest him. He won't go far." But Madhavi knew criminals like him worked with hidden hands. Catching one didn't mean catching all. When they returned to the hospital, Neha looked shaken. Machines had beeped aggressively an hour earlier. Doctors had rushed in when Raghunath's heartbeat suddenly dropped. Madhavi held her breath as Neha explained. Thankfully, doctors managed to stabilize him again, but they warned that emotional distress or shock could trigger another episode. Just as Madhavi thought things couldn't get worse, a phone call came. It was from a security guard near their home. Their front door was broken, lights were smashed, and the living room tossed apart. Someone had broken in. Viraj clenched his fists. "This isn't about money anymore. Someone is trying to destroy us." Madhavi looked at both her children and whispered, "We are being watched." The fear in her voice was undeniable. The storm that had begun with a simple argument was now spiraling into a full-blown attack on their family. When they reached home, the scene was devastating. Drawers were pulled out, documents were scattered across the floor, and valuables were missing. Someone had searched the house with precision, not chaos. They knew exactly what they were looking for. As the police examined the damage, Viraj noticed something unusual: a muddy footprint near the window. The pattern matched the shoes often worn by men in a local criminal gang. Inspector Mehra immediately began questioning neighbors. Some had seen a suspicious vehicle parked near the house late at night. Inside the house, Madhavi's heart sank as she picked up scattered photographs. Their quiet life had been shattered. She tried to hold her emotions together, but her hands shook uncontrollably. "Why us?" she whispered. A few minutes later, Viraj found a torn taxi receipt under the sofa. The timestamp matched the night they were in the hospital. Someone had followed them and returned to rob the house. When the inspector checked the number, it was registered under a fake identity. This wasn't random. This was organized. To add to the chaos, an anonymous note was found near the main door: "Walk away or lose everything." Fear crawled up Madhavi's spine. She could feel eyes watching them, even in daylight. The attack wasn't about money. It was about control, intimidation, and forcing them into silence. As they drove back to the hospital, Madhavi looked out of the window. Every passing car felt suspicious, every shadow threatening. She realized something chilling. The enemy knew their movements, their weaknesses, their entire lives. And this was only the beginning. By the time they reached the hospital again, the police had stationed 2 officers outside the ICU. The family was now officially under protection, but Madhavi didn't feel safe. Raghunath regained slight consciousness in the evening. His eyes fluttered open, weak and confused. Madhavi gently held his hand. "You're safe. Don't worry," she whispered, not wanting to burden him with the truth. However, the inspector soon arrived with shocking news. The CCTV from nearby streets revealed that Jitpal wasn't working alone. He had connections with a notorious criminal named Gajendra Saini, a man involved in identity theft, land fraud, and forced evictions. His gang was known for targeting vulnerable families and pushing them into legal and financial traps. Madhavi felt her breath hitch. This wasn't just theft. This was a trap meant to engulf their entire family. As evening turned into night, the hospital suddenly experienced a power cut. Emergency lights flickered on, painting the corridor in pale yellow. Neha gasped. Out the window, she saw two figures lurking outside. Their silhouettes moved swiftly toward the back exit before disappearing into the dark. Viraj ran into the hallway but found no one. The security guard confirmed he heard running footsteps outside. Inspector Mehra examined the CCTV, but once again, the cameras covering the back exit were mysteriously disabled. This was coordinated, precise, calculated. Someone wanted to scare them, silence them, and perhaps even harm them. Madhavi stood frozen, watching her unconscious husband, thinking, how could an ordinary family like theirs become the target of a criminal syndicate? But the real shock was still waiting for them. The hospital buzzed with tension the next morning. Staff members whispered among themselves as police roamed the corridors. Inspector Mehra called Madhavi aside and revealed that someone had attempted to break into the hospital's server room, where CCTV recordings were stored. The intruder wanted to erase the evidence from last night. Madhavi felt her stomach twist. This enemy wasn't just powerful, they were close enough to move freely. Meanwhile, doctors informed them that Raghunath needed to be transferred to a larger hospital with specialized cardiac treatment. The news added more tension. Transporting him meant exposing them on open roads, an opportunity for the criminals to strike. While arrangements were being made, new CCTV footage from outside the house arrived. In it, Jitpal was seen talking to another man, the same shadowy figure who appeared near the hospital window. His identity finally came to light: Gajendra Saini, the mastermind behind multiple fraud and extortion operations. The moment Madhavi heard his name, fear consumed her. People whispered that he manipulated entire neighborhoods, forcing families out of their homes with forged documents and threats. Soon, the ambulance arrived. Police vehicles surrounded it for protection. As they began the journey to the other hospital, the road initially appeared clear. But halfway through, a black SUV sped toward the convoy from behind. Its dark windows and aggressive speed sent a wave of panic through everyone. "That's him," Viraj whispered, recognizing the vehicle from previous sightings. The SUV tried to cut between the police jeeps, attempting to get close to the ambulance. Sirens blared. Inspector Mehra shouted orders through the radio. The convoy swerved into a narrower lane, accelerating sharply. For a tense 30 seconds, the SUV chased them relentlessly, until it suddenly turned away and vanished into an alley. The ambulance reached the new hospital safely, but the message was clear. Gajendra wasn't done. He had marked their family. The worst battles were yet to come. The new hospital felt safer, with tighter security and advanced monitoring systems, yet Madhavi could not shake off the uneasiness lingering inside her. Every time footsteps echoed in the corridor, she flinched. Even the beeping of machines made her heart jump. Raghunath was moved to a specialized cardiac ward. Doctors assured them he was stable, but still extremely vulnerable. Madhavi sat beside him, gently adjusting his blanket, murmuring prayers under her breath. Viraj and Neha sat quietly, drained mentally and physically. Later that evening, Inspector Mehra and 2 officers visited again. He informed them that Gajendra's gang operated through layered networks, small criminals, forged IDs, fake taxis, black market SIM cards. "They are watching you because they want something bigger than money," he said gravely. "But now we know more about them, and we will take action." Madhavi nodded, though fear still flickered in her eyes. Meanwhile, Raghunath regained full consciousness by late evening. His gaze was hazy, but when he saw Madhavi, a faint smile appeared. He whispered something, voice weak and breathy. Madhavi leaned closer. "Please take care of yourself, and the children," he said. Tears stung her eyes. She didn't tell him about the threats, break-in, gang involvement. His heart couldn't handle it, but his instincts were sharp. He sensed something was wrong even without hearing the truth. As night fell, a soft drizzle began outside, tapping gently on the window glass. Neha insisted Madhavi get some rest, so they took turns staying awake near the bed. At around midnight, while Viraj was resting in the hallway, he overheard two ward boys discussing a man who had come earlier pretending to be a relative, asking which room the heart patient transferred from City Hospital was in. The staff grew suspicious and refused to share details, but the man disappeared before security could question him. Viraj felt a chill run through him. He rushed to inform Madhavi and Inspector Mehra. The inspector tightened security immediately. 2 officers were stationed right outside their door, and cameras were adjusted to cover blind spots. In that moment, Madhavi realized something deep and chilling. Someone desperately wanted access to Raghunath, even here. But why? What did her simple, middle-class family have that criminals of this scale wanted? The answers were still hidden, yet danger was inching closer with every passing second. The next morning brought a sudden breakthrough. The police managed to catch one of Gajendra's men during a routine checkpoint inspection. The man was carrying multiple fake IDs, withdrawal slips, and a small USB drive. Under questioning, he confessed that he was ordered to monitor the hospital and report any police movements. "We didn't want to hurt the old man," he said nervously. "But the boss, he wants something from the family, something about land documents." Madhavi's heart sank. Land documents. She immediately thought of the ancestral property in their hometown, land that held emotional value but little monetary worth in her eyes. But in the wrong hands, land could become power, and power could become a weapon. Suddenly the pattern became clear. A forged signature here, a stolen document there, a break-in, a threat. Someone wanted full control over that land, and eliminating the family's ability to claim ownership was part of the plan. Inspector Mehra quickly arranged for protection at their old house and began verifying the authenticity of stolen files. Meanwhile, Viraj realized something that made blood drain from his face. The file cabinet that stored the land documents was missing after the break-in. It wasn't the jewelry, the cash, or electronics they wanted. It was the paperwork. Back at the hospital, tension tightened like a noose. 2 new officers replaced the night shift outside their door. The doctor reported slight improvement in Raghunath's condition, though stress could still cause relapse. Madhavi tried keeping her husband calm, speaking to him in soft, comforting tones. In the afternoon, Gajendra himself called Viraj. The phone number was unknown. The voice was deep, slow, and disturbingly calm. "You have something I need. Give it quietly and your family stays safe." Viraj felt his stomach drop. "We don't have anything," he said. Gajendra chuckled. "You have courage. Courage is good, but it can be expensive." Then the call ended. Viraj leaned against the wall, trembling. Madhavi rushed to him, reading the terror in his eyes. He explained everything. Neha's breath caught. The walls of the hospital suddenly felt like they were closing in, suffocating them. But despite the fear, Madhavi's spine straightened. Her voice, trembling but firm, whispered, "We will not bow to criminals. We will protect our family. Whatever happens, we will face it together." Her words lit a spark inside her children, a spark of strength they didn't know they had. 2 days later, things shifted dramatically. The police tracked Gajendra's hideout to an abandoned warehouse outside the city. A raid was planned secretly during the early morning hours. Dozens of officers armed with warrants stormed the building. Chaos broke out. Some gang members escaped, but several were captured. Among those caught was Jitpal. His arrest brought a sudden sense of relief, but the mastermind, Gajendra, managed to flee. Back at the hospital, Madhavi waited anxiously for updates. She sat beside Raghunath's bed, holding his hand. His health had stabilized, but he remained unaware of the escalating danger. Viraj and Neha paced the hallway, their nerves stretched thin. Then Inspector Mehra arrived, his expression serious yet hopeful. "We've made progress," he said, explaining the raid. "But we still have to catch Gajendra. He won't stay hidden for long." As they discussed the events, a nurse walked in carrying a folder of hospital forms. "These need signatures for the next phase of treatment," she said. But when Viraj flipped through the documents, his expression changed instantly. The last page wasn't hospital paperwork. It was a property transfer agreement with forged signatures of Raghunath and Madhavi. A wave of horror spread through the room. Someone inside the hospital had attempted to sneak in fraudulent papers, hoping they would sign without noticing. Madhavi felt her hands tremble. Evil wasn't just outside. It was creeping into spaces meant for healing. The nurse, terrified and confused, insisted she didn't know how that paper got mixed in. After checking CCTV, one frame confirmed the truth. A masked figure slipped into the document room minutes before the nurse arrived. He had broken in, switched files, and disappeared. This was Gajendra's desperation. This was his final attempt to grab the property before being cornered. Madhavi realized something powerful. Criminals were dangerous, but fear was even more destructive, and she refused to let fear rule her family anymore. That evening, with the sun setting behind gray clouds, Raghunath finally woke fully. His voice was raspy as he asked, "What happened?" Madhavi squeezed his hand gently and said, "A storm came, but we are fighting it together." His eyes softened with trust. Even in his weakness, he knew his family would stand united against whatever darkness approached. The next morning brought clarity. The police discovered that Gajendra had been trying to acquire multiple lands across several states to build an illegal real estate network. The Carter family's ancestral land was key because it connected two commercial routes. By owning that plot, Gajendra could extend his fraudulent empire. With most of his gang arrested, he had only one move left: escape or retaliate. Inspector Mehra increased protection around the family. Every corridor near Raghunath's room had patrol officers. But Madhavi knew that security alone wouldn't end this. They needed proof, strong proof, to permanently eliminate Gajendra's threat. That afternoon, Mehra arrived with important news. Jitpal had confessed everything. He explained how forged documents were prepared, how land records were targeted, how signatures were replicated, and how the gang planned to trap the family by making it appear they had willingly transferred the property. His confession was recorded, along with stacks of evidence seized during the raid. For the first time in days, Madhavi felt a weight lift from her heart. Justice was finally taking shape. Around evening, the courthouse issued a warrant for Gajendra's immediate arrest. Alerts were sent across nearby states, and his known hideouts were monitored. Meanwhile, Raghunath's condition improved enough for him to sit up and speak clearly. Madhavi told him everything, every threat, every attack, every danger. Tears welled in his eyes, not for fear, but from the pain of seeing his family endure so much. He placed his hand over hers and whispered, "You saved us." Those 3 words strengthened her resolve more than anything else. As night descended, police found Gajendra's location through phone triangulation. A small team cornered him on a deserted highway. After a brief chase, he was finally arrested. The news reached the hospital around midnight. Viraj gasped in relief. Neha cried openly, and Madhavi closed her eyes, whispering a soft prayer of gratitude. For the first time since the nightmare began, they felt safe. Not completely healed, but safe. Madhavi knew one thing. Justice had arrived, and their family's strength had defeated fear. Now, only one thing remained: the healing. The next morning felt different, lighter, calmer, almost like the world had finally exhaled with them. Sunlight slipped through the window and warmed Raghunath's face. For the first time in weeks, the room didn't feel suffocating. It felt like home. Inspector Mehra visited once more, bringing closure. Gajendra has been taken into custody. His entire group is under investigation. Your land is safe, your family is safe, and the court will ensure he never harms anyone again. Madhavi folded her hands gratefully. The fight was over. Justice had stood tall. Over the next few days, Raghunath slowly regained strength. Doctors praised his resilience. Madhavi stayed by his side throughout, holding his hand, feeding him soup, talking softly about small things to keep his heart steady. Her quiet courage had been the anchor through the storm. Viraj and Neha visited daily, guilt still lingering in their eyes for moments when they had doubted or argued, but a new bond had grown between them. A bond forged by fire, fear, and survival. A week later, Raghunath was discharged. As they stepped out of the hospital, a cool breeze brushed against their skin. It felt symbolic, like life was giving them a fresh start. The police ensured safe escort back home. When they entered the house, it was still recovering from the damage, but it no longer felt like a battlefield. It felt reclaimable, fixable, theirs. Over the next few days, workers repaired broken locks, replaced windows, and cleaned the rooms. The neighborhood, once silent and tense, slowly returned to normal rhythms. Neighbors who had stayed away out of fear now came forward, offering help and warm meals. Raghunath often sat on the veranda, watching the sunset, his hand always intertwined with Madhavi's. He said, "We saw darkness, but we didn't let it swallow us." She smiled, her eyes reflecting strength she didn't know she had until life tested her. Viraj grew more responsible, more protective of the family. Neha became emotionally stronger, taking charge of legal paperwork, ensuring no loophole remained. Together, the family rebuilt not just their home, but themselves. One evening, as they gathered for dinner, Madhavi paused to look around, at her recovering husband, at her grown children laughing together, at the walls once broken now standing tall. She felt tears rise, but they weren't of fear or grief. They were of gratitude. The storm had passed. The wounds were healing. The family was whole. And in that quiet moment, she understood the biggest truth of their journey. Sometimes life throws us into darkness not to break us, but to show us how brightly we can shine when we stand together. The danger was gone. The fear was gone. But the strength they built, that would stay forever. Logan, please, try to understand. Chelsea, no, you need to choose. This isn't sustainable. My breath caught. Choose. That word echoed like a storm inside my chest. I crept back into my room, heart pounding, tears burning behind my eyes. I didn't want Logan to choose. I just wanted respect, space, kindness. But I knew, I could feel it in every sigh, every heavy tension, every avoided conversation, that Logan was slipping further away from me, step by step, pulled by the gravity of his marriage. The next morning, Logan barely looked at me. His smile was tight, rehearsed. His coffee mug shook slightly in his hand. He wasn't cruel. My son was never cruel. But he was becoming someone I didn't recognize. Someone trying desperately to keep peace in his home, even if it meant losing a piece of himself. And somehow, in that silence, I realized something heartbreaking. My presence in my son's home wasn't seen as love. It was seen as a problem to be solved.